Look at this. Finally! In this video I'm showing you my first ever finished sketchbook in my first ever sketchbook tour. The stars have finally aligned.
A little note, I had a little problem there with my mic, but the audio will be fixed once the tour starts. I promise. Okay.
Okay, let's get into this. The first sketchbook I ever finished. It's certainly not the first sketchbook I ever started. I've been keeping sketchbooks for about 10 to 15 years, but I've never actually finished one. Until this. I didn't take my sketchbook practice very seriously in previous years, and I often had times where I just walked away from art for quite some time. But since around the beginning of 2022, I slowly came back into art and wanted to give sketchbooking a real try. I got myself 3 sketchbooks around this time, which is this one, and this one, and started working in them simultaneously. This one is my kind of watercolor travel sketchbook journal thing, which, as you can see, is not even half full. This is like around this is the last page I did, and then we have still quite some pages. This one I finished a couple of months after the first one, and I use it mostly for dry materials like pens, markers, pencils, stuff like that. I can show you this one in another video if you'd like. Now this took me almost 2 years to finish. I took my time and took several breaks in those 2 years. Those were times where I was very busy in my job. Being self-employed can get quite stressful, or sometimes I lacked motivation. But the more I got into the habit, the easier it got for me. I could feel my art getting more authentic and real as I went on, but we'll get to that in a minute. Let's jump into it.
This is a Hahnemühle watercolor book. The size is A5 and the paper is 200 GSM watercolor paper, which held up pretty well to pretty much any medium I tried. And I tried a lot. It has 30 sheets of paper, which amounts to 60 pages. Yeah, I'm that good at math. I started this on May 6, 2022, and I finished on February 22nd, 2024. So almost exactly 1 year ago. I put these sticker artists in the description in case you're interested, if I can find them. Except this one, this is my own sticker. Page number 1. This was the first thing I did. At first I really had no clue how to start the sketchbook, and the fear of messing everything up started to creep in. After all, I wanted to do it right this time. But at some point I thought, you know what, just do something silly. And a good old master study is always a nice thing to do. This is also a subtle statement about how the sketchbook might go. Bold and brash, or more like belongs to the trash. You know, we will see. This one was done with gouache. I added this opening kind of page later on when I was more than halfway through the book. Those are Depeche Mode lyrics, which is something I sometimes do. I refer to lyrics. A lot of my art is inspired by music. Those lyrics just felt fitting for the time I was going through, but also how my art practice changed alongside it. I'm trying not to talk too much about mental health in this video, but at the same time I can't not talk about that when talking about my art, because they both influence each other so much. This was an intense time period, and I can see my art getting more authentic, looser, and freer, as I felt myself getting more free, and I felt like I could breathe again. Enough rambling. On we go. Next page. This was part of the 100 Heads challenge, which I'm sure you know about. I started it in this sketchbook, and as I said, this one is only for drawing, but I wanted to paint some of the portraits, so I filled a double spread with those in watercolor. I really like the muted color palette, and I think the portraits look very nice next to each other. It's a nice cohesive look, even if some of the faces look a bit wonky. On we go. On this side is a gouache painting. I think I watched a Ruth Wilshire tutorial at the time and tried to apply her technique to my own reference photo. Overall, it turned out okay because I was still new to gouache, as I was to most art mediums. Looking at it now, I can clearly see it is overcrowded and has too much contrast. It's hard to see what's really going on in all this clutter. But still, I like how I painted parts of the foliage and, some of the grass in the foreground, like here or here. I came back to this page months later because I had left it empty for some reason. This was my second ever attempt at acrylic painting, and for that it looks really good. This was also painted rather quickly, and I really like how you can clearly see all those rougher brush strokes. I also like the color palette. Now, this is interesting. You can see these paintings next to each other, okay? And even though they use similar colors like greens, browns, light blues, the look of them is totally different. One thing I learned ages ago is that greens mixed with primary colors are more true to life and look more natural than green pigment out of the tube. You can clearly see this here. On this page I used green pigment from my gouache set, and in comparison with this one it really looks artificial and too saturated. And here I mixed my greens with primary colors because those were the only acrylic colors I had at the time. And it resulted in much more cohesive and believable colors. And it's so cool really to see these two approaches next to each other. Next page. The spread is really random for some reason. I just tried to replicate some sort of sketchbook aesthetic I had seen on Pinterest, I guess. I had bought 3 Posca markers, orange, black and white. And the concept of acrylic markers was such a novelty to me. So I wanted to try out how opaque they were, how they layered on top of each other, etc. So I did all those random things. This is overall the sketchbook where I fell in love with traditional art, really. In the years prior, I did mostly digital art and was very far away from picking up a brush or a marker like this. Yeah, but here I suddenly went down the rabbit hole and wanted to try out all those different supplies and got a bunch of new mediums. I had experience with watercolor and things like pencil, charcoals or ink, but I hadn't tried out all those things for a really long time. Yeah, that's definitely a theme for the sketchbook, trying out new art materials. Yeah, as you can see, probably, I really like the Posca markers. And so I ordered a bigger pack and I was so impatient and couldn't wait, so I tried around some more with just those 3 markers I had. The spread is not as random as the one before, because drawing birds is something that is way more close to my heart. Still, it's not the most exciting thing to explore in the sketchbook, but we'll get to that. In the meantime, my big pack of Poscas had arrived, so I put them to the test. Looking back at this, I can clearly see the problem with my art at the time. I wasn't in a good place in my mental and physical health. They were really, really bad. And my art shows that. This was just a practice and to try out my new Posca set, right? But everything had to be so tight. I spent a lot of time on the sketch of the Hokusai wave, so it turns out perfect and as close to the original as possible. All my art at the time was like that. Very tight, but not in a good way. More in an anxious, I can't afford to fail kind of way. Because that's what my life was like at that moment. Everything had gotten so out of hand and I had turned into a control freak of sorts. And I can see that in my art clearly. I'm actually still trying to get better with letting things be the way they are. Another thing, at the time my art motives were kind of shallow, I would say, for once, because I was learning and trying all those new art materials, for sure. But also because I couldn't afford to look too deep inside myself for something with a deeper meaning. Interestingly, a thing I noticed when I'm in a bad place with my mental health, my art turns more colorful. Whereas when I'm feeling better, my art tends to get deeper and darker sometimes. Because I can finally allow myself to look at those things, process them through painting, for example. This is actually a nice side effect of keeping a sketchbook for a longer time period. You can see your life change in one single book. It's so interesting to look back, and this spread tells me so much, even though it's just a copy of another person's art. Oh, this is fun. My mom has this beautiful wooden bench at her home with all those beautiful plants and little things, and I had so much fun discovering all those little tidbits she had placed there while I was drawing this. It also seems that every time I am at her house, she has changed things up. Different little trinkets, new arrangements, some plants are replaced by others. It's really fun. I did a ink drawing for this and then went in with watercolors later. I somehow don't really like how the bench is just, it's floating in space, and it makes the page look a little boring in my opinion. I wish I had just added a little bit of the surrounding living room, for example. Here I tried around with acrylics again, trying to create some sort of an abstract background for the first time. I wanted the color palette to shift from uncomfortable on this side to more serene on this side. In a way, maybe I was trying to manifest this change in my life. I don't know. But overall, it just turn out too dark because acrylics were still so new to me at this point. The background was just too boring alone, so later I added the hands and the writing, which is a song by Miles Kennedy this time. That song, One Fine Day, let me tell you. This has given me hope whenever I needed it. Ever since it was released in 2018, I always turn to that song when I need a little bit of a reassuring break when life gets tough. And the song also represents the feeling I try to achieve with the background here, from the stage here to the stage here. On to the next page. Here are two self-portraits with two different approaches. This one is painted in gouache and this one in watercolor. I was in Greece for a month when I made this, and I was there all alone and spent all the time with myself. So I thought about painting a self-portrait, which I really were not practiced in at the time. I started with this one, and in this I used no references. I was just going off of mood and vibes and trying to capture myself as I felt in that moment rather than how I actually looked. I know I had this braid hairstyle that day and I wore my favorite earrings, but other than that I really had no reference picture. And that's so interesting. This one here doesn't look a whole lot like me, but the vibe I get of this painting feels very much like me. And I can see myself in this more than in this one, although that one looks a lot like me. Here I used a photo from my wedding day as a reference, and again, my art had to be so tight most of the time. I stuck really close to the reference. And it is a successful watercolor painting, you could say, but it gives me no feeling, even though it captures my wedding day, which gives me a lot of feelings. This, on the other hand, shows me the first trials of taking more risks and adding more intuition, and this portrait expresses so much more. So that's a win for me. This is a master study of this painting by Caspar David Friedrich, Wanderer Above the Sea of Fog, or the German title, Wanderer über dem Nebelmeer. Yeah. Now he's an artist whose paintings I like a lot, and this I painted in gouache. But I added a twist. I added my husband, me, and my dog, who passed away just a couple of months prior. I just wanted to picture us three together once more in such a beautiful scenery. I miss him so much, even today. Back home from Greece, I felt the itch to practice more portraits. I'm not sure if I counted those for the 100 Heads challenge. I think not. I believe this one was the 100th of the challenge, so I was just in the mood of practicing. Yeah. Look at how much better the anatomy and the structure of those faces here is compared to those portraits at the beginning of the sketchbook. Yeah. This one I didn't like as much, but whatever. It's practice. Yeah, I really tried to leave my comfort zone here. Some ink drawings I did using line of action references. I did this using this dip pen I had, which was fun. And I think they turned out really good, especially with this one here. I almost always fail at estimating the correct height of a figure. So the feet often end up out of frame, like down here, for example. But not this time. This just fits perfectly. Also the anatomy in this, I mean, look at this, the arm right there and everything. I really like them. I didn't really know what to do so on this side, so I started filling the page with random drawings, trying out different materials or techniques to capture the face. I can see myself opening up to new things here, showing some courage, embracing chaos. Here we have two charcoal portraits. What can I say? They turn out kind of meh, I don't know, but at least I tried. I don't know, I screwed up her lips, the nose, the eyes, everything basically. This portion of the face is kind of nice, but other than that, this wasn't really great. But I found the perfect fixative. When I sprayed the spread with this transparent acrylic spray, wait a minute, it has a satin finish and it works like a charm, let me tell you. You can't even tell I put anything on those pages, but everything is fixed perfectly. No smudging, nothing. I mean, look at this. Nothing. Next page. Oh yes. This is easily my favorite spread in the sketchbook. This is an actual original painting and I like it very much. This was inspired by a song, once again, this time by one of my favorites by Tool. I won't tell you which song it is, so you can think of your own story, but also because it really doesn't matter. Music inspires my art so much. So often when I hear one line of a song or even just a tiny little chord progression, or an interesting use of an instrument that plants such a vivid image in my head that I just need to paint. And most of the time, the theme of the painting has nothing to do with the song itself. The music is just the starting point, and that's so inspiring in of itself. That's something that really fascinates me. Yeah, so lots of love for this painting. This has also quickly become my favorite color combination. Indigo, cool shades of grays, and of course the gold. I even try not to use those colors too often, so it doesn't get old for me. That's how much I love them. Please let me know in the comments, do you also have a favorite color combination that you gravitate towards? I'd really like to know. After I did this, I wanted the other page to have something that makes the entire thing cohesive. And then I came up with this idea. I like how well the sculpture turned out with limited use of color. The white shines through pretty much, and the simplicity really makes it look like marble. I'm glad I tried something original for once, because it really shows me that I'm capable of producing my own and meaningful art that really speaks to my soul, if I just let myself do it. Now, after this spread, I didn't touch the sketchbook for months. Maybe I was intimidated after I accomplished something I really like. I don't know. But that's how I came back. So I put myself in that meme, obviously, painted with gouache, just to make a subtle comment about my creative routine. Yeah, and this here is a portrait done with pencils and alcohol markers, just for the fun of it. And also this shows me how I could take myself and my art a bit more lightly, even though there was such a long pause in between. But on we go. As I was still in the process of getting used to acrylics, I followed a Jess Karp tutorial. I think this tutorial is a part of her Patreon, which I was subscribed to at the time. This was the first time I really understood how acrylics tend to dry a little bit darker. That's also why this painting turned out a little bit too dark. But I took my learnings and put them to good use in this painting, another kind of beetle. This time very colorful and saturated compared to this one. I just love juxtapositions like this in my art. One topic, two very different meanings or executions. The values in this turned out just right, and I like how I captured the shine and all the colors of the scarab. Also, I painted this only using the 3 primary colors in my set and white. Quite interesting how many colorful colors you can get just with those 3 primary colors. I guess they're primary colors for a reason, right? Here I bought my first set of color pencils. I got this beautiful set of 36 Faber Castell Prismacolors. And it was my first try using color pencils since childhood. Yeah, I have nothing much to say about this spread other than I tried out how saturated I could get with all those colors, how well they blended, stuff like that, yeah. But all in all, it's not that interesting. I don't like this. I had this concept of the 6 of Crows fan art in my head and I wanted to try it out, but I failed miserably. This doesn't look at all like what I wanted it to. Maybe if I painted an actual background, it would have been better, I don't know. On the other hand, this is a win because it shows me I'm getting more accustomed to making mistakes and trying stuff out. 6 of Crows, especially Crooked Kingdom, is easily one of my favorite books. Leigh Bardugo in general is such a good author. She often writes about fear in a way that's really intriguing to me. I also love the Shadow and Bone Netflix series because the casting was really, really phenomenal. I wish they didn't throw the 2 stories together like they did, but it's still a shame the show got cancelled. I was so looking forward to the 6 of Crows spin-off. Whatever. Some more playing around with color pencils. Those 2 are nice. This one not so much. And here I sometimes paint stuff on old street signs, like I did here, for example. And this was another idea I wanted to try out. It looks just like I wanted, but for some reason I haven't done this painting yet. This was done with Posca markers again, but yeah. I guess one time in the future I will finally get around painting this. More acrylics. So nice. Yeah. I have a weakness for Doc Martens. They are technically the only brand of shoes I wear most of the time, and rightfully so, I might add. The skin color is weird though. I always struggle to mix good skin tones. It's just so hard for me to get right in almost every painting. This is also the first time I tried out a pink underpainting, which I like for some of my acrylic paintings now. Here's another charcoal drawing. The skull turned out pretty good. Nothing to add. It's a nice drawing with my awesome fixative. Again, I'm doing more of what interests me now rather than what I previously thought I should do in the sketchbook. So another win. This is nice. I know I did this spread a little later, chronologically speaking. For some reason I had left this double page blank and came back later to paint this. some chickens in gouache. Chickens are such a comfort painting or drawing topic. I like how I added these blue and yellow undertones in this one and also in this one. Makes it look really nice. Chickens are just the best. This spread has an actual composition. Here you can really see how my approach loosened up. The art is not forced to be so tight anymore. It looks so nice, actually. I did the outlines with ink first and then added watercolor loosely later on. Also, those were just the things I had lying around on my desk that day. I can't stress enough how important it is to have a kazoo nearby at all times. A little bit of life advice right there. I wish I could always use watercolors like this. This was a good art day, actually. Also, more chickens. Those are little figures a friend gifted to me. I like it. In my art supply shopping frenzy, I also stocked up on alcohol markers and tried out Ohuhu markers for the first time. I had a bunch of Copic markers, but they were really old, so it was time to get something fresh. I still remember how much money I spent back then. It's so nice that we have affordable options today. I drew those things on marker paper and glued them in here. I just later realized how nice the markers actually look on the sketchbook paper. Too late when I had glued all those in. I mean, look at this chicken, for example, how crisp and nicely blended with just one go of the markers. Back in design school, we learned to use alcohol markers on marker pads only. I only recently realized how much nicer they look on nicer paper. Now, with markers being so much cheaper, saving ink is not as important as it was back then. And I definitely want to try this more. Now, this was just for the fun of it. As you may have noticed, I really like painting birds and I regularly return to ducks. Yeah, this was just stuck in my head. You know, some Iron Maiden, some fun, whatever. I present to you my second favorite spread in here. I sketched a bunch of crows in ink. I don't know, something about birds, man. And then, finally, I invested in Holbein acrylic gouache. And I was so blown away. This is such a wonderful art medium, guys. It works like a charm. It looks as nice as gouache, but is handled as easily as acrylics. The Holbein colors are so vibrant. I love them, really. It's easily one of my favorite art supplies now. Highly recommended. This scroll looks so good, and the painting process was so effortless. I love this. And naturally, after such a good spread, I took a break from art. Again. Not voluntarily though, I had such a busy and stressful time at the end of 2023 that I started 2024 with low-key burnout symptoms. I didn't paint anything for several weeks and the thought of coming up with something to paint made me so tired. So after a while, when I slowly got better again, I wanted to dip my toes back into the water and start with something simple. So I just put on some YouTube tutorials. So this is how this spread came together. I even wrote down the channel names here and here if you want to go check those out. Here we have birds. Of course. And here I used my new go-to color combo. It's nice to do this to get back into the habit of creating and also doing something that's comfortable. I wanted to paint, but I still didn't feel relaxed enough to try something of my own. So I went on to Domestika and bought 2 courses to follow along. This one here, the first one, was by Mike Thomas, and I went into some color mixing fundamentals and painting cityscapes. You know, practice painting gradients and then paint some skies or the cityscapes. This one here was the final piece for that course. Then I went on to the next course, which was a course by Don Kilpatrick using acrylic gouache, and he offered some really interesting insights into his painting process. Again, some fundamentals and some thumbnail sketches for the final piece. I really like the small thumbnail down here. I should do those more often. I will do those more often. I promise. I promise myself to do this in the future because I really think you can improve tremendously by painting small, thumbnail style, quick, and lots of them. This is the final piece from that course and I like it. The reference to this is a sunset photo from my camera roll that I took out of my car while waiting at a red light, and yeah, nicely done. I can really recommend doing classes or tutorials to get out of the creative rut. They help you to just get going, offer some new insights, and take the pressure off of it. At least that helped me during this phase. Even though this is not the last page yet, this is the last thing I painted in the sketchbook. I tried painting a still life, which I don't often do. It's a shame really, because you can learn so much of painting a still life. The most interesting part about this was painting the correct values and reflections of this little disco ball here, as well as the bounce lights and the oranges, which created a greenish color, which was really interesting. And again, just look at how vibrant those wonderful Holbein acrylic gouache colors are. I'm so in love. And here is the actual last spread. I just painted random things from Pinterest with different mediums to kind of celebrate all the new things I tried out in the sketchbook. This again is painted with acrylic gouache, as is this. Those three were done with watercolor, and those were a combination of alcohol markers and color pencils. Yeah, and that is it. The first sketchbook I ever finished. You can stay around just a little longer while I talk about what this sketchbook has taught me about my art and what's next.
I finally did it! Finally, after all those years, I finished a sketchbook. Why was this so hard? This marked the start of me really getting back into art, traditional art for that matter. And at the start of this, I was still so new to all those different traditional mediums. As I mentioned, it is interesting to see how my art changed along with my mental health. I finished this one much better than I started this in. I try not to compare myself with those other artists on YouTube who seem to crank out finished sketchbooks every other month, but at the same time it really frustrates me how I'm so slow in my art practice. If I was just a little bit more consistent or quicker, I know I would improve so much faster in my art. But for now it is what it is, and it's not bad, right? Currently I'm working in those two sketchbooks here, but I don't have made much of the progress, especially with this one here. I've only filled like 4 pages. I'm not quite sure if it isn't just a little bit too much space to fill. I'm also still in the phase of trying out how the paper works and stuff. This one, on the other hand, is such a fun size and it's fun to play around with. I really like this one. It's also a lot cheaper. Let me know in the comments if you would like to see a sketchbook tour of this one here, which I finished in June 2024, so around 4 months later than the other one. This one features a whole lot of drawing and has a totally different vibe to it. And this is also where I really continued my journey to be a little more loose with everything. That's all for today. I hope you have a nice week. I go do some work and I hope to see you next time. Bye!